Okay, we're going live. We're live. Hey guys, this is Aimee.
Hi.
You guys probably know her from channel. Are you called Beat of My Own, or just when did you change it?
No, it's called Aimee Y, but my Instagram is Beat of My Own, so most people know me that way. So
Oh, okay, nice.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so we just wanted to do like a little collaboration and talk about like the differences between like an ESFP and INTJ. We don't have any sort of like bullet points or scripts or anything. So it's kind of just free flow. So I'm kind of relying on the ESFP to generate some content here.
I know, it's like very ESFP to just be like, okay, I guess we're gonna do it live stream, I guess.
I know my husband and I were laughing because I was like, so when do you want to do this? And you're like, well, I guess, do you want to do it like in 2 days to give you some time to prepare? And my husband was like, that is like not time to prepare in your book.
Is that not for me? It's like, oh God, thank God, 2 days.
No, I was like for me, time to prepare would have been like a week. But I was like, okay, you can do it like this.
Oh my God, that's so interesting. Okay, well, I guess like in order to address like the difference between the two, I would say like, I mean, we can talk about just in terms of how we use our functions, because, you know, we both have the same exact cognitive functions. And it's weird because a lot of mistypes can happen in this realm. I was one of those people. And so like, for example, what is your experience with like SE? Because I know it's different from mine.
Right. My experience with the SE is that it's basically gone all the time. Like I consider it to be absent like 98% of the time. Occasionally I can get in a mood where I'm like really in it. Like I can get in the mood where I want to go to a club and just like dance for a couple hours, but that's not very often. That's very occasional, but I can get in moods like that. I think it shows up kind of in passive ways. Like I think INTJs are kind of attuned to, like every INTJ I've seen has kind of a minimal style and like aesthetic, and their homes are very minimal and like sleek. And so we're like attuned to the way things look, but that's kind of a superficial sort of version of SE. You know what I mean? That's not it. That's not SE in full force. That's just like one dimension. That's just like sight. Like it's not attuned to like all of the senses in the present reality. It's kind of just like designing visuals like in one dimension.
Got it. So it's like when somebody's talking to you, what are you thinking about that? I'm curious, just because it's like, I mean, if you're not present, I'm thinking like, okay, where are you?
No, I'm literally, I'm like in my head so much. So a lot of times what will happen is I feel like there's kind of a delay. So like my husband and I will be talking and he'll say something, and I was thinking about maybe his last sentence, and I was like, oh, a connection here, a connection here, a connection here, a connection here, to the point where I'm making connections in my mind. And so then by the time he might make a joke or something, there's like a delay. It's like there's a few seconds. Then my mind processes. It's like he says the joke, a few seconds, I hear the joke, and then I respond. He's like, that was delayed. And it's like it's not that I don't like get the joke quickly. It's that I don't hear the joke until a few seconds later. And then when I hear it, I get it quickly, but I just didn't hear it.
Got it. Yeah, that's so strange to me because it's like, I mean, in terms of like visuals and things like that, I guess I kind of lead with it. So it's like I do have intuition, but because I lead with that sensing, it makes sense that I'm predominantly focused on the sensory. Like if you like look behind me, it's just like super bright and everything. And it's like my first priority in doing anything is like making sure that everybody else has like good experience, like making sure that like my mic is okay, or like I look good, like anything that has to do with like the physical. I guess that's like my go-to. And then for me, where intuition comes in, it's more running in the background. So I guess the only thing is, like if I'm super stressed, and this is hard to tell between like an NI dominant and NI inferior, is that when I'm super stressed, I think that my intuition is actually like better than the NI dom because I'm so stressed. Yeah. So I'll like really overanalyze, or I'll really dig into things. And I can see how that can look like NI dom to somebody who doesn't even know what I'm going through. But for me, usually when I'm in that mode, it's not a good time, or it's like, it's something that I'm doing when I'm really stressed out. But in my natural state, I just want to like, I want to like forget all that background stuff, and I just want to like be doing what I want to do. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like what happens with the inferior function is that there are spikes of it. So I'll get in spikes of it where I feel like when I talk about like I will occasionally get in those modes to go to like a club and really like dance. I feel like during those spikes, I could come off more like an SE user than even an SE dominant does. I don't think I use SE better than them in that moment. They're going to be a lot more refined with it, but I do think I will use it more intensely for a very short period of time.
Got it. Okay, so it seems like it's just a matter of the reason why the mistypes can happen is because you don't really even know if they're in that stress mode or if they're just relaxed. So I can see how even an INTJ can look like an ESFP because if they're like, let's say, going through something stressful and they're really like obsessed about their environment right now and making sure all the details are perfect and things like that, then it's like, okay, they're going to look like some kind of a sensor dominant type. So that makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially like, I don't know how you associate the difference between like a loop and a grip. I feel like what I've noticed in my life is I think that the loop shows up more often. And I think that the grip shows up less often, but a little bit more intensely. And I don't know what your experience has been with those.
Yeah, I can see that happening because for me, I actually appear to be some kind of a TE user because when I'm in the SCTE loop, that intensity of SE of being so present mixed with that organization, that combined intensity looks like a very TE dominant user. But what you're not seeing though is that because my TE is like my child function and it's like it either works for me or it doesn't work for me. I think what I have trouble with is understanding that I can be patient and it'll still happen. For example, like in a work situation where, something is occurring, I immediately go into this mode of like, okay, well, let's just get that done because I'm so present and I feel like, oh, there's no time to do it tomorrow. So why don't we just get it done today? And that can kind of look like TE, but it's not TE. It's actually the combination of SE and TE kind of going in this loop of like present reality and then that childish like TE like mode of like planning.
Yeah. They're both very action oriented.
Yeah. So it's really intense. It's really intense. But I think the difference between maybe like a TE user, just like a predominant user, maybe that you guys may have more patience in that process. Like whereas the SE person, I think it's like, it looks like we have that patience, but when you really observe what we're doing, we don't have that patience. We're very quick to be like, oh my God, like everything is so frustrating. Like, I'm just trying to organize, get out of my way.
Right. I know. I kind of have liked like personality hackers, just like analogy where they talk about that third spot is kind of like a 10-year-old, you know what I mean? It is like how like a teenager or I don't know, someone who's a little bit less refined who has that would use it. Like I've known some like ENFPs and ESFPs and you can tell when they're in that loop and they definitely come off more pushy than I think ITJs do. They can even come off like more bossy. And I guess theoretically they have less TE than we do, but since they have the tendency to want to go in the extroverted attitude anyways, I think that it comes off a little bit more intense.
Right. Yeah. And
how do you feel like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
How do you feel like TE, like, how do you feel like that TE loop, like, manifests in you? Like, have you seen that show up?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you said. It's just in a very childish way, which, again, I thought I was a good TE user, but in retrospect, I think it was my SE that was working more than my TE. So my TE, I mean, it's there, like when I need to get something done and I work in a very organized manner, right? But I think that it's like I almost don't have the patience for it is the problem. So when what I want to do naturally is to just go in full force is what I want to do. And then my TE kind of comes into play to organize it, but then I kind of go into this just screw it mode. And then I just go into that like SE disorganization again. I think I talked about this. I talked about this like quite frequently on my Instagram and things like that. And this is probably like a wake up call that I have absolutely no NIT whatsoever, was I am horrible with planning. And not planning and when I say planning, I'm talking about making calendars and things like that. I'm horrible with it.
That's like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, no, I'll make it, but it's like I'm really bad at following through on it, which might actually be that the ESFP thing where it's like I am making the calendar. It's very childish. The calendar looks absolutely adorable. I have all these colors on it, but am I actually following it? No, and it actually stresses me out to follow it. Whereas I think maybe somebody that's
Yeah.
a TE user like yourself is probably better at actually following through on it. I have no idea what that means, but you know.
Well, I think one thing I've noticed from like the FPs, like my husband's an ISFP, and there's something about that FITE polarity where it's like FI idealizes things. So like when my husband gets into like planning something,
Yep.
he idealizes and he thinks he can get a lot more done than he can.
Yes.
So then
Oh my
when
God.
he
Yep.
doesn't get it all done, TE will tell him like, oh, you're not being very productive. And it kind of like will shame him, but it's not really that he's not that productive. It's that he kind of overestimated how much he could get done in the first place.
Right. Which, yeah, it's that lack of foresight. It's there when you need to focus. But yeah, you're right. I do that all the time where I just overestimate the things that I can get done, I guess. And it's like, oh my God. But the thing is, okay, but because I have SE though, it
Yeah.
actually is not that big of a deal for me because I tend to have this mentality that, you know, I'll get it done. You know, I'll like forge my way through it and like mold the environment if I have to make it my way. So after finishing it, I'll have this mentality like, oh, like I'm so intuitive. I got that done. Like I'm so good at planning. But in reality, it's like, no, you're not. Like you're not good at planning whatsoever. You just forced your way through it. And I wish that I could like work in a more like straightforward manner of getting it done. Like you
Oh, sure.
INTJs do. Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes what I like envy is I think SE gives you guys a really good sense of flexibility. I am not that flexible sometimes. If I have a plan, if something like for example, so when I'm working on YouTube videos, I'm like on Mondays, I like to theme my days. I'll do this, I'll do this, all this. If I get off by a day, the whole week is just gone. Like if one
Oh,
element of the
really?
plan goes away, I'm just done.
Yeah, no, I think for me it's actually like I start my I guess I'm the opposite of you almost. I start my day very structured, or I think I am, but then I'm like, ah, screw it. And then it's like it's for me, it's actually what causes the chaos is the structure. But for you, I think the chaos is that things happen to you and you're like, oh my God, but that's not what I planned for. Like this isn't what I wanted. But for me, the chaos is that like I'm so like controlled in this box. Like that to me just feels like really like I just need to be free.
Right. I've been thinking about that I feel like EPs, for example, find freedom in like lots of choices and like an openness of schedule where it's
Yep.
like IJs find their freedom by getting things locked down. Like this is what we're doing. We don't have this open-endedness that's bogging us down with the decisions. Like the decisions are made. So now my mind can be free.
Yeah, it's like I want to be structured, but my own way, which is not structure at all. Yeah, I can see that.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't. Let's see. We also have okay, so here's where it can be kind of confusing because you have NIFI, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have just FI. So for me, when I use my FI, for some reason I thought I was in like an NIFI loop. When in actuality, I think I may have just been stressed out with my inferior and I. And maybe it was more like my FI was not working. And it's supposed to be something I'm responsible for. It's supposed to be a savior, but it wasn't there. So for you, it's like, I don't even know what tertiary FI even is anymore. Yeah, like I really don't.
I mean, I think so when I think about getting in that loop, I mean, FI, it can be very childish. Like I think some ways that I've seen FI manifest in a bad way is like sometimes I'll be like debating like with an INTP or someone and I will misalign my identity with my argument with FI because FI is a lot about identity. And then that argument piece is like TE. So I'm kind of using both those functions. And it can be very difficult for me to not, I don't know, it's kind of like, it's not really anger, but it can be difficult for me to not get emotional in the midst of debates because normally I will bring in moral or philosophical points into a debate. And so I kind of feel like this can't be wrong. Otherwise that means like I'm immoral or it means I'm not logical enough. And so sometimes I will attach winning an argument to my identity. And then sometimes if I just shows up by like moping, just being really unproductive. Like if I was not very conscious of this personality system, I think I would probably come off more like a feeler, and I would be really quiet and just kind of mope and not really get anything done. And I would do a lot of idealizing plans, but there would be no TE accomplishing them.
Okay, so that's more when you're going in that loop where you're not extroverting anything. So it's
Right.
just kind of this value system versus your vision, and just like, okay, I can see that happening. Yeah, I also get emotional too, though. Like when it comes to debates and stuff like that. But maybe that's more. I think it's predominantly because I'm stronger with FI. So it's like obviously my identity is going to be looped into me a lot more than the INTJ. So I also get it.
Because we have that same. We've got TEFI in that same second, third spot, and so I would imagine it could show up similarly.
Yeah. I guess it's just more like I lead with it though. So looking back on it, like if you look at my content and stuff, I can see myself being more obviously FI than you, probably.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So even if there's that like structure that you might see, that TE structure, it's more like I lead with that, like, but I want to help people or whatever, you know. It's like that's why it's like I have a hard time doing like typing sessions and things like that, or charging for services because
that FI.
Yeah, and I think
not authentic to charge or something.
Yeah, I think that maybe like ENTJs, INTJs might feel a little bit better at doing that, maybe. But it's like for me, I feel like I just want to help people, not charge them for it. And it's like it makes sense that I feel responsible to make sure that, you know, the values are met. Whereas I don't know that an INTJ or an ENTJ really like necessarily values that FI. So I think you're leading more with that rationality of like, okay, yeah, but like we need money or whatever. But it's like I can't think like that.
I know. It's like I feel like that FI only shows up, it mostly shows up negatively, to the point where like the advice that I always have to learn, like with having a YouTube channel and stuff, is I'm like, I need to think about the audience. I'm like never thinking about that. Or like I would look up, like I was watching like a Gary Vee, and he's like, if you're not responding to comments, like that's a jerky thing to do. And I was like, oh. So then I started responding to comments. I'm just like I'm honestly, I'm like in YouTube, like if I could just like do what I want to do, I'm doing it so I can be alone in my house and not have to go to work and control my schedule. Like I am not really thinking about the people behind the camera. And so that's like my development exercise.
Really? Huh. Yeah, I do think about the other person behind the camera. In fact, my whole content is revolved around that other person, I think, which might be confused with FE, but I mean, I think like in order to if you have strong FI, you obviously have FE too. So it kind of goes together. But yeah, my content is like revolved around other people, or even like the comments. I will like read it and I'll kind of take note of it and I'll understand it. And then I'll like make the content.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that FI can sometimes appear like FE, but it's, I think, like I noticed like with my husband being an ISFP, he is very attuned to other people, but it's definitely on an individual level. So you might be thinking of maybe like one person behind the camera that you're speaking to, but it's not really so much FE managing the whole culture of an entire group.
No, it's not the priority, no. And in fact, you know, if on the other hand, if somebody does not match my values, I'm usually very good at being like, okay, I don't want them in my life. But I think it's because I'm more concerned about my worth. I'm not concerned about matching against other people's worth. So, I mean, in that sense, you know, being an FI user, it might be the same for INTJs, but I'm pretty aware of like how much I will bend over for somebody. Like, I'm not the kind of person that just like emotes for other people. Like I have a good sense of values within me.
See, and I think that's something that I don't know that I have such a good sense of values. I'm aware of how people make me feel, especially maybe after the fact. But I'm not so much consciously aware of other people's values and my values. I'm mostly aware, like, if I was wanting to do like a live stream with somebody, I'm mostly like, are they credible? Are they reputable? Are they successful? And that's kind of like my metrics. And I think that they must have good values to be at a level of success, which I know that doesn't always follow, but I think in my mind, it's like they must have had good values at some point to rise to the top, and maybe at some point they got corrupted or whatever. But I think I have the feeling that you have to have good values to reach success.
Okay. See, so you're leading with that rational thinking of like, well, the feeling kind of comes afterwards. It's like, well, they must have had some kind of a valuable something. But for me, yeah, you're right. I actually lead with that value system more. So I kind of have the mentality actually that this is just specifically speaking about FI, but I tend to have the mentality. It's like, well, just because they have a following doesn't necessarily mean they're good, is kind of how I lead with it. Like, it's almost like I'm the judger of the values, not necessarily like going along with the crowd. Like, I'll be the judge of that. I'm the source of that truth. And that's how I make my value decisions.
Oh yeah. See, that's kind of interesting. Even so, like, I wouldn't consider like having a following success. I think like when I think of success, like if I was going to look at a YouTuber and be like, are they successful? I would look at them and I'd be like, do they seem like they're healthy? Or do they kind of like seem unhealthy? And usually I think that healthy people or self-aware people or people that are interested in improving themselves will kind of like invent and expand until that like drives them to success with all the change and invention. I probably look at money a lot more than you would. So I would look at money as being successful, and yeah, do they look healthy from what they speak about and how they speak? And
yeah, no, for me, I don't think about money very much. I actually think about like, are they authentic? And in fact, like I talked about this in another like interview that I did, but my favorite artists looking back on it are ESFPs or some kind of like maybe even an ISFP, but they're very, authentic with themselves. They're not fake. Like, they just do what they want to do. And it makes sense because, I mean, although I'm not as developed as them, I also have that same morals where it's like, I need to do the right thing. What I judge to be the right thing, though, not going along with the crowd, but what I judge to be the right thing. And that's kind of how I tend to lead my life. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a random thought that I'm thinking of. So what types of people, and I'm wondering if it'll be people similar to you or different to you or whatever, what types of people do you tend to be like jealous of or like envious of? Or maybe you're not, and I could answer too.
No, yeah, you're right. Like, being an SE user, I am rather competitive actually. Like, I tend to, whether, I don't know even if it's a conscious thing, but yeah, I do kind of size them up. Like, what kind of people do I tend to be jealous of? I do tend to be jealous of like wealthy people. To be honest with you, I tend to not be jealous, but it's freaking jealous. Or I tend to be, you're right. I tend to be jealous of people that are able to just leave that kind of like feeling mentality out of it and can just be successful and think about the money. Cause I know damn well I can't do that. Like, I wish I were the kind of person that can just like put all that aside and be like, okay, but where's the money? What are you doing to make money though? In fact, I hate that question. I hate when people do that shit. Like, when I tell them like, when I tell them like, I like to do something and they're like, oh, okay, well, like, does it make money? I hate that. It's like a huge pet peeve of mine. I'm like, sure. Does it have to? Like, I like doing it, like, but
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, if people are jealous about their, like, bottom two functions. Like, when I think of people that I'm jealous of, like, I would say I'm kind of jealous of ESFPs. I'm jealous of people that can, I'm jealous of people, I guess, that get outward recognition. Maybe this is, like, more extroverted people. I'm not sure what function that connects to.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But I feel like a lot of IJs, I feel like, are really skilled, but they don't get a lot of recognition. Because they're just not like out there advertising it so much.
You're actually right. I can see that happening because they have so many insights and they have so many visions, and just they can see like they have the best prediction of what is going to happen. They're very intelligent people, but you're right. It's like the negative thing about them is like the ESFP will go to the INTJ and be like, okay, yeah, but like, what are your experiences with that though? Like, what did you actually do that makes you predict that way? And I guess in that sense, it's like the INTJ can be kind of like, okay, well, I'm just filling in the blanks here. I didn't necessarily do the thing, like, but but I have all these insights that I refined. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
And I think part of it is just like you say, like ESFPs or extroverted sensors are going to be a lot better at the way they look. Like you were just talking about, like your microphone, the way you look, and you want people to have a good experience. Whereas I'm just not thinking about that. And so I think probably other people's perception is going to be like, this person is not healthy, or this person's like super weird, or this person doesn't take care of themselves. And so when you don't give off a good advertisement, basically people are not gonna people make judgments about you within 2 seconds. They're not gonna like stick around.
You're right. Yeah, I have never had a comment that had to do with my looks ever. Like, I'm not saying that like, oh, look at me, I'm so pretty, but I'm saying that like, I guess you're right. It's like I feel responsible for making sure that people like have a good experience looking at me. So even at the workplace and things like that, I would never have a problem of like looking disheveled or like ever. I'm always like looking like top notch, like I'm dressed properly. And it's not something that I try to do either. I think it's like, you can tell me not to be that way and I will still do it. It's like, I feel responsible for doing it. I've had like YouTube comments where they're like, oh, like, Aimee, your content is so good already. Like, you don't need to wear all that makeup. Like, just like get on camera and do it. And even then I'll feel the need to be like, okay, yeah, but like, what am I going to wear? Or like, like, I'll still think about it. It's like, I cannot not think about that aspect of like the aesthetics.
Yeah. Those comments are so weird because I think the intent of that comment is supposedly to be validating, but at the same time, they're like criticizing what you're doing.
I know. Yeah, you're so right. It's like, okay, but yeah, it's like, I just can't. I mean, I get it. They're telling me to just be myself and blah blah blah. But at the same time, I think it's like being myself is like that. So I was like, yeah, I totally get it. Yeah,
that is weird. That is one thing that I did not like about being on YouTube is that I'm so used to being the observer, the person who sits like on the periphery of the room and is observing other people and noticing other people's mannerisms. And then when you get on YouTube, and especially if you have like an INTJ channel, there are all these, observant people that don't have the FE to really communicate it in a way that is nice. Yeah. So I got all sorts of comments be like, look at how she's always looking over here, or look at her nose, you can tell she's an INTJ by her nose, or like, and like all this stuff. And I was like, people need to stop. I was like, I don't like being looked at so much, you guys need to stop.
The Voltology crowd is like something because judge you based on your looks. And I'm like, you know how like INTJs have like the death stare and stuff like that, or like the eye movements and things. And I'm just kind of thinking in my head, like, my eyes can only open so much. Like, it's like, I'm like, why are you judging me based on how big my eyes are and things like this? I'm like, that could be explained by so many things. Like, my eyes can only open so much. Like, it's like, please don't judge my eye movements.
I know. Then there were some people who are like, you can tell the way her lips move. And I was like, looking at the way my lips are moving. And I was like, I think that's because of braces. I think I had like to develop this like thing around braces.
There are a number of reasons why my lips move that way. It's definitely not my type. Like, it's like, yeah, I'm like, but the one that grinds my gears actually was, I remember receiving comments, and this is when I used to make INTJ content.
Yes.
And I would actually receive the comments that's like, oh, your makeup is too pretty to be an INTJ. Those kinds of comments, to be honest, bugged me, even if if I wasn't an INTJ at the time, because like, those comments are so stereotypical. It's like, okay, so you are implying that a true INTJ would not wear makeup or would not care about their looks because they're supposed to, I don't know, be like these like broody, moody people that don't shower. It's like, I'm like, what the hell? Like, it's so weird.
I know. Yeah. The stereotypes are really bothersome. And I think, we've talked about this before, but I had like gotten a few comments on one video that's saying that I like wasn't an INTJ. So I found myself trying to like compensate and to really appear like an INTJ. But then when I analyze those things, what did that mean? Okay, it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to do my hair as much. I'm not going to do my makeup as much. I'm going to like not be expressive with my face. I'll never be expressive. I will never move. I'll intentionally never move. And it's just also fake. And it basically just comes off like a really unhealthy person.
Yeah.
And so I did that for maybe 2 videos. And I was like, oh, okay, we're done with that. That's so draining.
I found myself doing that too, actually, when I was making content, is that I'll mold myself to look like the certain type. Granted, at the time, like, I mean, it makes sense, like, that I naturally was an ESFP, so it made it even harder for me to act like an INTJ. But yeah, I found myself, like, trying not to, like, smile, because I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't want people to be like, you smile too much to be an INTJ. And the irony is that, like, I created a video, like, specifically talking about how we shouldn't judge people by, you know, our behaviors and things like that. And I still get comments that are like, you know, like, actually, now come to think of it, you speak way too fast for like an INTJ and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I literally just said that none of those things determine your type. It's more about your subconscious cues.
Yeah, your
Not necessarily
cognition.
like, yep, it's not necessarily just like how fast you speak, how slow you speak, or yeah. Or
I
like
know.
those people that are like, oh, you know, you look too much like a feeler type. I'm like, do you even know what that means?
Do you mean a woman? Is that what you mean? Or
Exactly. It's like, okay, like, yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever. And I do think that, to be honest, like on YouTube, I think that the TJs get that a lot harder, especially the women,
yeah,
because I
yeah.
think that there is a stereotype that, well, obviously in society, that, you know, women are kind of like these dumb blondes. And then, like, so when somebody comes on YouTube and says, I'm an INTJ, I'm actually a thinker type, they get all like, okay, but like, you're not like a Hillary Clinton, you know? It's like, or they compare you to these crazy, like, high powered people. And it's like, okay, just because a woman is a thinker type does not necessarily mean, you know, they all look a certain way or they have to be that mold. And I do think you guys get stereotyped a lot easier than the ESFP. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like there are some types in different genders that are probably going to have a tendency to tone down their type.
Yeah.
So like if you have my husband's an ISFP, I feel like society doesn't want like men really to be feelers, or it conditions them to be like rough and rugged, especially because I grew up in a really rural place. We both did. And so it like really encourages that type of thing. And so it's going to tone down his hippie veganism fi sort of stuff that he like. That's like who he's come into more now. And I feel like the same for me. Like I feel like when women are bossy, it is really looked down upon.
Yeah,
and I feel like I get things explained, like people will really over explain things to me to the point where like, I get it, I got you in the first sentence. Like you are still going on for 10 minutes explaining this thing. And I think, I don't know, I feel like there are some women that don't really understand sexism fully just because they haven't put themselves in scenarios where that stuff happens really frequently. Like I was never treated so poorly until I was in a math major. And then I would have like, if I raised my hand, I had a professor that was like, if I answered this in a pink marker, would that help you?
Ooh.
And and so anyway, so that same professor did a bunch of stuff, ended up reporting him or whatever. And they were like, this is like the 7th time he's been reported for stuff. And so I feel like some people just haven't put themselves in scenarios where that stuff happens. And they're like, sexism, what do you mean? That doesn't even happen. That doesn't even exist.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know it unless it's done to yourself. Definitely.
Yeah.
I thought that by being in the typology community that doesn't exist, but it's actually quite the contrary, where I do think that, I mean, regardless of your type, the women tend to seem to get it the most. And it's like, what I thought was really interesting too was that when I was an INTJ, everybody was like, well, you know, you're not an INTJ. But then when I said I was an ESFP, which was supposed to be like a self-discovery point for me, I noticed a lot of people were like, oh, that I can see, which is really odd because it's like, I'm the same person. I didn't change at all. So it's kind of like, okay, so are you just implying that I was too stupid to be an INTJ, but I'm the perfect ESFP dumb blonde woman, basically, is what you're implying. Because it's like, I'm the same person. I'm saying the same things. It's just, you know, the type is just different. But yeah, and I was kind of like, okay, like that's an interesting stereotype that I specifically think women get that bad rap for it.
Right. And I noticed like the first part when I was on my channel, an abundance of the comments initially when I was first were just advice. People would be like, you need to do this. You need to read this book. You need to do that. And I felt like I was getting a lot of like, read this book. This would really help you if you would read this book. And I was just like, why am I getting so much advice? Whereas my husband had a channel too, and he wasn't getting any of that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because the implication is that, like, you're a woman in the typology community, so you must not know, or, you know.
Or they would just recommend to me like super, at the time I was doing more like I don't know what you'd call like productivity content, and I would get recommended like super basic books that like everyone has read. Like,
Right.
you really need to read this book. Have you ever heard of it? Yeah, I've heard of How to Win Friends and Influence People. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like that's something that, to be honest, like I'm almost like glad I'm not an INTJ, because that is the one thing that like I did not like being an INTJ, was an INTJ on YouTube, because that was probably like a lot worse. Like,
I think like, I mean, yeah, two parts to that. One is that NI is gatekeeped a lot. People are like, no, you can't be an NI. If I said I was like if I said I was like an ISTJ, people are like, oh, sure, yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah, I totally see you as an ISTJ.
Yeah, people would never criticize that one so harshly. And it's like in the name of objectivity. They're like, the tests overinflate NI, so I'm going to go the other way and be really unobjective and be like, no, you're not NI.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I don't remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just that INTJs don't have very good FE in general. So if you're going to have an INTJ channel, you're going to attract a bunch of INTJs, and they're going to come in with like the criticism.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like the irony also is that we forget that, you know, when we get these bad comments, we don't know them personally.
Right.
And I mean, they're really just trolling. But yeah, it's like they also are probably mistyped too. It's like, that's like the irony too, is that like everybody's like saying like, well, you're not this and you're not this, but then it's like, okay, but how do you know that you are then? You know, it goes both ways, and the judgments just like are kind of like ridiculous. But yeah, I definitely believe that NI is a very as soon as somebody comes out saying they're NI dominant, everybody will jump on them and being like, no way, you're NI dominant.
You're not allowed to.
You're like really scrutinized for it. And when I said that I was an ESFP, everybody almost like congratulated me. They're like, oh my God, I knew. Good job. And I was like, y'all, I'm the same person. Like, I was like, yeah, it's like there's no boundary for that, you know. Like I don't really have that many people telling me things like, oh, you know, but you're not an ESFP. I think you are a blank. Nobody says that to me. But I do think that with INTJs and maybe even INFJs as well, there is definitely that like you guys are just like placed under like a microscope almost.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it can give bad messaging to people if there's someone who's like an INTJ and they're watching an INTJ that they perceive to be like healthier than them or more well-developed, they have to be like, nope, that person must not be my type because I'm here in my comfort zone. And for me to see someone who is more developed of my same type is a little threatening to the FI pride that I've developed in myself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And people don't take into consideration like the amount of effort that you put in to even do this damn thing. Nobody, they just think that it just comes out naturally. And you're right. It's like everybody wants to be that healthy INTJ, but if they can't, they kind of judge you like, oh, then you're not normal. You're the one that's not INTJ.
Right.
Which is completely untrue.
Yeah.
But, yep.
Yeah. And I haven't got those comments in like, I honestly haven't gotten a you're not an INTJ comment in months, but my husband was like, next time you get one of those comments, you should just be like, what's your type? And then they could tell me and be like, no, you're not.
Yeah. There's no proof of it. Like, it's like,
nope.
What are we basing this off of? Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. And we forget that, you know, all of this is honestly, it is hypothetical. You know, it's not like hard science. I think that's another thing is that people confuse this with psychology or even hard science. And it's not really, it is still based on theories. Right. And nobody can really objectively type themselves even. Because, I mean, all of this is actually based on the subject. It's subjective. It's actually not objective at all. So, yeah, it is kind of like weird to tell people they're not a certain type because, I mean,
it's a little arrogant.
Yeah, it's like, how do you know that? You know, we don't, because it's all a study of the subject. And then what gets worse, as you said, is that not only are you typing other people, but then you're also basing it on behavior. So if one person's behavior does not match this other person's, then it's like one of you is not that type, is the way people tend to think. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. It's I've experienced that as well. Like when I made a video with Lijo actually. Yeah. And it's like, the funny thing is, when I was an INTJ, everybody's like, oh my God, I totally related to that. I love that. You guys are so real. And then when I said I was an ESFP, everybody was like, you know, looking back on it, and I'm like, okay, you know what? That's what makes this ridiculous.
Right. It's like one crowd's going to come at you, and then if not that crowd, it's this crowd.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, clearly, like we base type based on what's observable, and yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how INTJs would even like. What do you think in the future your content is going to look like? Do you think that you're just gonna continuing just being yourself, or is it like, do you find yourself kind of pressured to make a certain kind of content, you know?
Yeah, I think what I've observed on YouTube is that there are different types of content that can get you to certain levels. Like I think in the Myers-Briggs community, it looks like it can be relatively easy and quick using the INTJ keyword to get to like 30,000 subscribers. Beyond that, I don't see a lot of people breaking out of that. A couple, but not very many. What I would like to be doing is personality or personal development content in general. So what I would kind of like to do is ride the personality wave up to a certain point. And then if I get a big enough following to get more into just like general personal development, but general personal development is so, I don't know, it's kind of oversaturated that you have to be at a certain amount of subscribers before your videos will actually really do well.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that. It's like you can make personal development content, but it does make it easier when you're talking about MBTI, which is really cool. But I think as an INTJ, it's a very hot topic. Like, a lot. I think, you know, I think it's not just that. I think people tend to think like INTJs are a rare type. How come there's so many INTJs online? But I do genuinely think that the INTJ personality is actually a very difficult personality to understand. I really do think so. And I dominant is a very difficult thing to understand. If you have it, it's very difficult to like explain yourself to other people what that is. So I do think that a lot of INTJs flock to YouTube for that answer. You know, the sensor types, not too much, because most sensor types are not into typology. So you're not going to really find them on YouTube. So
yeah, I think that's partly why some like the humor videos do really well, where it's like 16 personalities at a coffee shop or something, because I think that draws in more sensors. It draws in a bigger crowd.
Yes, you're right.
And it's like easier to digest, you know what I mean? And I think part of it is that a lot of the people making YouTube content are Ns. And so they're in a dark room and their microphones suck and they're not making any facial expressions that sensors are like, I'm not waiting around for this.
Yeah, that's so true, actually. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's like, as a sensor type, I definitely do that. I think another thing is that sensor types tend to, in my opinion, focus on the practical usage of typology, to be honest with you, which is where you get the 16 personality sketches. It's like, you are using it for humor, you are using it for this, you're using it for that. There's some kind of a goal to use typology for. And I'm the same way, where I can explain the abstractness of the theory and everything, but ultimately what I am trying to do is I am using it for very practical purposes, and that is as far as it'll go with the sensing type. I think that the intuitive types kind of have a more richer explanation of what exactly that theory is, which explains like the 30-minute videos.
And also just the slowness. I mean, it just being slow.
It's like on 2 speed for me every single time I watch it.
Oh yeah, for real. Yeah. And I think that's partly like TE versus TI. Be like knowledge for knowledge itself, or like knowledge for a purpose. Yeah,
you're right.
That's what I want more of. I want more like, how can I like implement this to make me a better person? That's what I felt like was missing on YouTube. I was like, what's missing on YouTube is growth-oriented quality videos. And I mean quality as in like audio visual.
Yeah.
Fast. Yeah.
Actually, your previous video, I noticed you did, I forgot what the topic was about, but it was like really well made. It was with all
thanks. Was it writing on the screen?
Yes. Like I was what you used to do that. But that was a very informative video in my opinion.
Oh, thanks.
Informative, but aesthetically pleasing too.
Thanks. That's like how my mind is all the time, like diagrams in my mind, sort of.
Wow.
So whenever I talk about personalities, I'm like always seeing that like grid chart thing that I mentioned. And when I mention a loop, I'm always seeing like a drawing of a loop. And anyway, so I was like, I need to just like extrovert that.
Wow, that's crazy. You see, I thought I was like that. I really did. And I can get like that when I overanalyze or when I'm in my inferior NI. But for the most part, my God, I just want to like break out of that. Like I don't like thinking like that, to be honest.
Yeah.
And
makes sense. Yeah.
Your video was very detailed.
Thanks. That's like so freaking long to edit.
I'm sure
was like, I don't know this ever again.
I'm sure it did. It's yeah. And I think for me, I always used to talk about how much I hated editing. And it kind of makes sense to me because I think I just want to talk about it. I don't want to do like the editing and things like that. I have no patience for it whatsoever.
Yeah. So. Right. I know. It's like whenever I watched YouTube videos before doing YouTube, I was like, oh, they just like sit down with their phone, they record it, upload it. And that's like what I thought it was. And it's like, you have to get the lights and you have to get your microphone ready and you have to hook up the camera and the battery has to be charged and the SD card can't be full. These are the things that I am constantly bombarded with. Like the odds of me wanting to go film and battery not being charged. So finally I had to develop a system because it happened too many times. But yeah, and the editing takes me several hours per video.
Yeah, same. And it doesn't help that I'm not really detail oriented either. So I just want to like post and go, but no.
Yeah. Like I've heard some like ISTJ, like I think Catherine Manning, she like is a YouTuber that talks about YouTube, and I think she's an ISTJ, and she talks about like she's much more SI detailed. Like she's like, when I edit, the first step is I always do this, and then my second step is this, and my third step is this, and it's always the same.
Right.
Whereas for some reason, I have a system that's like, but it's a broad system. It's like on Mondays, I need to get editing done, but I don't have any like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. I don't have like a flow.
You're right. Yeah, I can see that too. With Catherine Manning videos, her videos are very easy to understand because it's just the structure and just the timestamps and there's such a good process to what she's doing that I would want to watch somebody like that too. You know, I wouldn't want to watch somebody that's kind of just like general terms.
Right. Yeah. Right. You want to know like, how do I do it? Show me. Yeah. And then you get it done quickly.
Yeah. INTJs are very, very different because considering how strong your TE is, I think from society's standpoint, you guys look like the detailed type. Like just, I mean, if I had to give you some kind of responsibility, just looking at you and I know nothing about type, I would just give you something that's very detailed because I just think like, well, you're the smart one in the group, right? You're the thinker type in the group, right? Sure. But I wonder if you guys even like those kinds of responsibilities. And I think we just like impose it on you or something.
Yeah, no, I do not like detail-oriented tasks. Like I hate spreadsheets or things like that. I like the sort of initial startup sort of phase, like to get the ball in motion. And I can set up the system that eventually other people are going to have to follow. That's the sort of thing that I like. But paperwork, I detest. I feel like a lot of teaching is a lot of just SI hoops that I have to jump through, I feel like.
Yep.
It's a very SI dominant culture. Yeah, but I like responsibility for things that matter to me.
Yeah.
And the things that matter to me are very few.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a typical like TFI user where it's like it is coming from like things that you value. You're just projecting it in a TE manner, I guess.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So for you, so this is like, I'll give you like my example. So for me, I feel like the way to personal growth is to develop your second function. And then once that one gets honed, develop your fourth function. And from there, I think there could be more steps, but I haven't like tested or rated it yet to be certain about it. I've heard different people, C.S. Joseph, talk about like you do like INTJ, then you do ESFP, and then you be an ENTP, and an ISFJ, which I haven't really tested that to know what I think about any of that. So what do you think, like what's like the system or like the path to like personal growth?
I think that's interesting. I think for me, it's really just about discovering what your top two functions are even. I think we kind of blaze through that, especially when you're younger. I think we tend to think that, we haven't made in life and like we got ourselves figured out. And then we kind of like blaze into like, okay, well, what's our weakness? Okay, so let's work on that FISE or, for an INTJ. But I personally think that by recognizing your top two functions, I don't know how you're going to do it, but for me personally, that was the biggest improvement for me.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
well, you see, because I don't even know if that's just me basically more of an extroverted advice than an introverted advice. So that kind of matters too. Because I always preach to people that the way you find your type, the way that it worked for me is to actually like interact with the external world. Because the more you interact, the more you're going to know what you are and what you are not. And that's how I clearly found mine, was that even though I thought I was introverted, but I would like interact with the world, I would get out of my shell, and I realized actually I do not like being indoors. I get that energy from going out. And that's when it started to click, like, oh, wait a minute, I don't know that INTJ is really my type. So it might be an advice, but I don't know.
I mean, I think the advice probably would be the same for both. I have heard this kind of idea I'm playing around with. Someone said, at work, maximize your strengths, and in relationships, work on your weaknesses. And I wouldn't follow that literally to a T, so specifically. But I think in general, like when I think about myself at work, like to really hone in on NITE, I think is really helpful to just really intensely specialize in what I'm good at. And then when I think about relationships, the big hangups are like communication and SE. And I actually don't work on SE from a like defensive standpoint, like, wow, I suck at SE, so I need to work on it. I don't know. I view it kind of like optimistically from like an offensive standpoint, like just like how can I in a fun way incorporate this more into my life?
Yep. I think that's really smart. And I like that you said that, because it just goes to show you that, you know, your inferior, I don't think, in my opinion, should be something that should be developed per se. I think, like you said, it's something that should be incorporated in a healthy manner. Because
so that's very specific wording. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you said that, because it's like, it's the same for me with NI. I don't think I will ever, like in the moment of stress or when I really need to react, I don't think NI will ever become dominant for me. I don't think I can ever use it as strongly as possibly you would. However, it's good to incorporate that in a healthy manner. So, you know, before I go on a shopping spree with money I don't have, it's like that little intuition that kicks in and says, hey, hold up. Do you really need that? You know, I'll never be amazing at it, but it's good to just be aware to incorporate that. I think that is the healthiest way that you can develop it's to just be aware of your weaknesses, but to just in a healthy way incorporate it in your life. Not necessarily develop it. I don't think that we'll ever develop that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you make the distinction between the two words. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think sometimes, I get pushback when I say develop TE, but I think, or I mean SE, but I think I do mean incorporate.
Right.
But see, I don't think about wording very specifically usually. So I think like in my mind, when I say develop SE, it's like take it from 0% to 3%. And it's like, that's not a strength by any means, but that's, I guess, development. It's not becoming an ESFP at all.
Yeah, exactly. I actually I just recorded a video on that too, where to be honest, when I thought I was an IJ, I did not like the advice of people saying like you can become an ESFP if you develop your SE enough, or like you aspire to be an ESFP, because I think that if you are an NI dominant, that SE should be really difficult to access, and to give the advice to like flip yourself and just like, oh, but like you can, you know, tap into your SE inferior. I just think that's a very like, if not utilized properly, I think that's a very harmful advice actually. Right. Because I can't even imagine, now that I know I'm ESFP, I can't even imagine somebody telling me the advice of actively using NI as like a first, like almost as if it were a first function.
First responder,
that's going to cause me, like, I would be so neurotic like that.
Right. Yeah. And so, okay, maybe like 6 months ago, I was like, okay, I'll try the advice of like becoming an ESFP or whatever. And it gets very exhausting. Yes. I think it adds some like flavor to my life, but there comes a point of exhaustion. You're like, okay, this is not helpful. I think the advice is helpful, you know, to incorporate it. But becoming an ESFP is like too much, especially because then that would mean I'm going to have introverted feeling again. I'm not quite sure what I think my relationship, like, I don't know exactly what my thoughts are on how to develop or what you should even do with that third function. Cause in my experience, it's just been bad. Like just avoid it. This is kind of what I do so far.
Yeah. Well, I've actually read that, when I was doing my MBTI practitioner certification, I actually was reading that there actually is a debate on whether there is even a tertiary function. So it could just be that your two middle functions are just working in tandem, and it's not necessarily like the tertiary function is this. And I think objective personality also kind of has this incorporation of like, you know how they have like the double deciders? It's just the idea that the
It's like
deciding
an NI,
right.
INTJ. Yeah.
So the deciding factors are just working in tandem, and it's not necessarily like FI tertiary and an INTJ. I don't know. It's just something I like. I was reading about. So it could possibly be that that's why we feel so disconnected almost, or like I don't know about you, but my third function feels really random. Like I don't fully like grasp it as much. I understand inferior and I dominant and even the parent function, the auxiliary function, but that tertiary is a little like it's hard to explain.
Right.
Sometimes I have it, sometimes I don't. And that's pretty much it.
Right. Yeah, those second two are kind of interesting because I do feel like sometimes that when I look at like ENFPs or ESFPs, sometimes I feel like I have more FI than them, but I don't know that it's better than them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's like I have a tendency to dip into it more than they would, but when I do dip into it, it's not like I'm using it better.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of what you value. You know, are you using FI because you value it? Probably not, because you're an INTJ. Whereas for me, I'm using it because I value that. It's not something just that sporadically happens, which may be the difference between the tertiary and the dominant two.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just looking at the time. It's been 56 minutes.
Yeah.
That's so great of you to do this for so long. I get like, when I have like conversations like this, I get like really in the zone. I'm just like not aware.
Yeah. No,
I didn't look at the time until it had been like 40 minutes and I was like, oh, yeah. But then I was like still interested in it, but I was like, I need to just stop again. Maybe I shouldn't do this for so long.
Yeah, and I'm used to these because like when we do these collaborations, it's usually like the timers up there. Yeah.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This is very interesting because I've never actually done a live stream before. So
yeah, we'll see how this posts. Yeah, everybody watching. We were having a hard time figuring out what platform to use.
Yeah,
so like,
we made it.
End it. We don't know.
Yeah, we made it.
Nice. Okay, well, okay, I'm going to end this. We'll see how this goes. Bye, Aimee.
Bye.